And I just wanted to share with you some of the important things about, working in a team and working in business. So there's a lot of skills, like what we're developing in Monday session is your practical skills. So these are the things that people are going to look at you and say, okay, you've got this cyber incident response management, you can do computer forensics, you know these tools. Okay, we know that from a practical sense that you can complete the tasks that we're going to be able to give you, that we're going to give you. There's other skills that you can develop that really don't need, some of them, you need to work on, but, there's things that you can achieve and that you can write on your CV and that you can talk about yourself that aren't sort of 10 years in a job type experience. You can go to someone with no work experience, but talk about how you can communicate, self-motivation, your leadership skills, social responsibility, teamwork, all of those sort of things. So these are also things that employers value. These are things that, as I said, you don't need 10 years experience to achieve, but when you go and present yourself in an interview to someone, if they're any sort of leader, they will value those skills. And normally in an interview, like they'll give you some questions and gauge your response based on, these attributes as well. They might say, okay, well, how have you worked in the past to tight deadlines, and what strategies did you put in place to be able to achieve an outcome within a short period of time? Things about working under pressure, things about communicating, things about how do you deal with something when you've got something that goes wrong and people who are angry at you? How do you manage stress? All of those sort of things are soft skills that employers value that don't relate to years and years of work experience. Because the challenge that you're going to have moving into the working environment and landing your first job is, how do you convince someone to give you a start? How are you going to stand out and, give someone enough confidence who's looking for a person to hire that you're the right person for that job. So talking about all these sort of things is a really good start. First and foremost, and the whole reason for these weekly meetings, communication. What we want to do is build up your ability to communicate and your understanding of the value of communication. You need to be able to communicate effectively. You need to be able to, present within an open environment where there's other team members there. You need to be able to communicate amongst the team and talk and negotiate and resolve challenges as they come up. Self-motivation is a key one. Like as an employer, I would prefer to have someone who can think on their feet, start something on their own, come to me if there's an issue, and that's all around motivation. So if you are sitting in a job that you don't like for years and years and years and not happy, you're not going to be that motivated. But if you're consistently achieving, then you're demonstrating a willingness to learn and a self-motivation. Even if you're not a team leader or a manager, you still need to demonstrate leadership within your team. Within your team, within your co-workers and colleagues. You need to decide what sort of person you're going to be from a leadership perspective, because you don't, as I said, you don't necessarily have to be managing a team or running a team to have leadership skills. Leadership skills are around standing up and saying, okay, I think we should do this, and being able to present being able to present an opinion, convince others that the way that you're suggesting is the best way to do things. But also leadership is about listening. So being able to take input from people and provide feedback, and it's a it's a both-way street. So whilst you need to be able to stand up and say, hey, I think we should do it this way, you also need to be able to recognise the value of others' opinion as well. So there's a saying that I've held dearly throughout my career, and I heard it early on. And it's that, the best leaders understand that their job is to move the barriers that the people they look after need removed to do their job. So it's not about, it's not always about you must do this and, being a badass and, kicking people's, morale around saying, you did this or you did that or whatever. They're the worst leaders. The best leaders are the ones that can interact with people, work out what challenges they're having, and then be the advocate to remove the obstacles for those people to be the best in their role and to bring the best out of them. So there's a whole thing around leadership that's really important. Responsibility. Now, I've worked with a lot of people in my career, and the ones that I admire and like to work with the most is the ones that take responsibility. So someone who you can give something to and that they know that they have to do it and they get it done. But also responsibility is about sometimes when things go wrong and sticking your hand up and saying, hey, that's my bad. Like I did it, I own it, I accept that, and I'm going to do what I need to do to fix it. And people will admire that more than trying to dodge, blame someone else, not accept that, it was yourself that made the error or caused the issue. So for me, I've always been on the honesty is the best policy side. So wherever there's been something where, I made a mistake, I stick my hand up and I'll say I did it. And I think that's, it builds credibility and it builds rapport with people, and most people will admire that more than the alternative. The alternative might be a bit less painful, but ultimately responsibility is the key to building trusting relationships with people. Because at the end of the day, they'll know if something happens that you're the guy that's going to call it out. Teamwork. So sometimes it's quite difficult, particularly if you're, we're talking about cyber security, we're talking about tech skills. You guys are going to be potentially tech leads, and sometimes in the industry where I've worked, the people who are the most technical, who can do all of the things that need to be done, they're the sort of people that you can go to and they just know what needs to be done and they can do it. Sometimes those people don't necessarily have the best ability to work with other people. They're quite, isolated in their own personalities. But, you need to be a bit of a hybrid. You need to be the person who knows what to do and knows how to fix it and knows, the systems inside of it. And at the end of the day, that just comes down to self-education and reading. I've worked in lots of industries where, or lots of customers and lots of technologies where it's brand new and no one knows what it is, how it works. But what I worked out over the years is that, everything's got a manual. Everything's got instructions, everything's got documentation that you can read. And to be the smartest person in the room, and there's different versions of smart. There's book smarts and there's intelligence. To to be the smartest person in the room, sometimes all you need to be is on, page 15 when everyone else is on page 2. So that that is a sort of technical lead and technical person that you want, in my opinion, that you want to be, and one who has good team working skills, who's humble, who's open, who shares information, and who tries to do their best to build everyone else's skills up around them as well. Because at the end of the day, the person who's the most isolated, who holds everything in and doesn't share is going to be usually the most busy, because no one else can do what they do. So there is value in participating in a team. Problem solving. So problem solving from a technical perspective, obviously you need to be able to troubleshoot and problem solve issues and find root cause. But problem solving also is looking about things on a broader perspective. So whether it be in your home life or in your work life, identifying issues and coming up with ways around them and solutions for them. So that's quite important. Decisiveness, there's not anything worse, in my opinion, than someone who can't make a decision. I just prefer to say yes or no than maybe. And I think decisiveness is something people value also, because they know when they come to you with a problem or an issue and they need an outcome, that you're not going to sit on the fence and say, oh, that's too hard, or there's too many issues, or it's going to take too long, or and have 5 reasons why you can't do it. It's, yes, I can do it, I'll get it done by this time, and then you just put everything into it to get it done. Ability to work under pressure and time management. Time management, the more responsibility you get, the more meetings you have to attend, the more, other activities that you need to participate in. Time management becomes more and more important. For me, I've got about 7 different calendars, and I need to manage them very closely along with my work output and the time that I have to spend on a particular task. I can't, at the end of the day, you can't procrastinate, or you need to try and procrastinate as little as possible, because every 10 minutes that you waste is 10 minutes at the end of the day on the weekend that you're going to have to catch up with. So always do try and do good time management and working under pressure. Particularly with working under pressure, you need to work out how you deal with stress, and whether that be walking or any sort of exercise or hobby or whatever. You need to have something that allows you to de-stress. Working under pressure is fine. If you've got tight deadlines or you've got a major issue that you need to fix, most people can handle it, but it's what happens when they go home that you need to worry about, to make sure, because that's a health issue. Flexibility. Having worked in the tech industry since early 90s, I have worked on some really, you'd look at it and say, geez, this guy must be 100 years old, because when I started out, it was all electromechanical. I worked in telephony most of my career, and I worked in telephone exchanges. So when I started, it was all electromechanical. Then we moved to stored processor control, and then we moved to IP, and that sort of took a 15-year period. But flexibility to me is being able to move with the technology and learn as new technologies and emerging technologies come to the market. If you can do that in your career, then you'll always have a job. Having worked in Telstra for 23 years, I saw a lot of people who were the top level of what they did, but they weren't willing to, take on the next thing or do the next thing. So what happened is ultimately you do yourself out of a job, because then you become unneeded, irrelevant, legacy, they call it, legacy technology. And when legacy technology, the company makes a decision not to, move forward with that anymore, and you haven't reskilled or upskilled, that becomes an issue. So flexibility in what you do and the technology that you're willing to work on is very important. And then finally, negotiation and conflict resolution. So with that, that's highly important in anything that you do, whether it be work, home, family. Um, People need to make compromises, and you need to be willing to, give a bit to get a bit, and not be hamstrung on the fact that it needs to be your way or the highway. So once again, like teamwork and like leadership, it comes down to staying humble, being able to take advice and input from other people, being able to listen to someone else's suggestion. And, because at the end of the day, someone might have a better idea than you. They might both work, but, you need to be willing to listen to other people's opinions as well. So, work on that. And as I said, as a whole, as a package, when you go and present yourself to a potential employer, talk about some of these. The important ones, I'll talk about all of them, but work out what employers or potential employers like to hear is how you see yourself, um, you know, with these soft skills, helping them in their business, and then also examples, and it might be work examples or home examples or university examples, but how you've used these soft skills in the past, and give them, in your mind, be ready to answer questions around, how you've demonstrated those attributes, because that's, as I mentioned at the beginning, what employers value, as much as technical skills. All right, so let's talk about meetings and what employers, when you get into your first job, obviously with COVID, there's a lot of remote working. We're moving back towards face-to-face, but particularly with working from home, on Zoom or Teams or WebEx, what's expected from you from an employer perspective. So, as I mentioned, I'll always be flexible just in case someone is having technical issues, but always like to kick off a few minutes after the scheduled time. So join early. Always, it doesn't cost you much, but if it's 10 minutes before or 5 minutes before you start trying to connect and there's an issue, you're usually going to be able to resolve it before the meeting start time. So it's always good practice to try and join early, because people want to see you there waiting when the meeting's about to start. And that will be something that's around, trust and people relying on you, because they know, you have these sort of things consistently over a long period of time, and then people will build their, their rapport and respect and trust in you. Dress appropriately. So with COVID, I have to say my own personal experience, like I used to wear suits 2 or 3 days a week. With COVID, it's more t-shirts and maybe a collared shirt like today and a hoodie. I think there's probably a lower expectation on a video call than there is in a face-to-face meeting. And it's also like, a face-to-face meeting, you need to dress at a level that you're comfortable with, and also at a level that represents the role and the job that you do. So, you can go into certain places and do things where a t-shirt and a pair of shorts is fine. But then there's places where you need a collared shirt, and then there's places where you need to do a suit. And it's just about using your own intuition around what's appropriate. If you're having an internal team meeting, then a t-shirt or a collared shirt's fine. If you're meeting a customer and it's an important meeting, and you're presenting yourself as a professional organisation, then obviously dress appropriately for that. Mute your microphone when you're not talking. Now, I reviewed, because I had to drop off from Wade's session on Monday, and I reviewed the recording, and I did notice that there were a few people that were, causing a lot of background noise. So it's really important that you respect people when you're on the call by making sure that you've got good phone etiquette, because there's nothing worse than people particularly if it's okay, people accept that sometimes you might have a distraction or be looking at answering another call or something like that. Always make sure that you go on mute, and particularly if appropriate, turn your camera off as well. So just make sure that you're quite focused on what image you're presenting out, and how that's going to, how people are going to see that. Stay seated and present. Sit up straight. Well, I'm slouching a bit. Have a look at your own image. You've probably got, if you're me, you've got a double chin, so make sure the camera's in the right spot so you look the best on the camera. I actually prefer presenting online than face to face. It's much less intrusive. It's much more comfortable. It's like talking to people over the phone, except they can see you. So just think about the way that you present, and also background. So if you're at home, or if you're, in a cafe or somewhere where you're not in a work environment where they can see sort of a meeting room around you, it's easy enough to mock up some image files that you can, use as your background that look quite professional. I've done a number of them for Zoom calls, and because I work for multiple businesses, I've actually got, different business branding on some of them as well. So presenting yourself, the way that you sit, the way that you look, people still look for eye contact even though you're on a video call. So try and look at the camera, put your screen in a place where the camera's close enough that you can be looking at the screen but it looks like you're looking at the camera. So just all of those things, just whilst different nuances of calls, it just sort of shows your presence and your availability. Like I had a meeting with a guy, highly intelligent guy, probably the smartest guy on the call. And the way that he'd set his camera up, he was basically sitting almost, it looked like he was sitting on the floor. His computer was up here. He was looking at his screen, which was to the left. And when you look at his picture on the screen, it just looked like he was looking like this, like he was looking into space. So you need to be very conscious of how you look, because if you're going to share your video, people are going to judge you on that. So just make sure you set up properly. And then that's where we go to aware of your surroundings. So have a nice background. If you're unable to be in a spot where you've got a clean, crisp sort of professional background, they just use a background image. And then avoid distractions. So, and it comes down to microphone awareness. Make sure you're not doing rustling sounds. People get annoyed by that. If your phone rings, the ringtone is very loud through the microphone. Put your phone on silent. Be attentive and clear in the meetings, and people will appreciate it that longer term. So that's the end of the slides. As I said, I always present, or try to present with a few slides. It helps you stick to the program, it helps you stick to the agenda, and it helps you be more attentive. Now, speaking of which, I've been sitting here without my video on all this time, and I didn't even realise, because I presented my screen. Now, as far as backgrounds go, so I've got a number of them that I use. This is for ITIC, which is the new joint venture company. And then I've got a couple of different ones for ITIC systems. And then, more or less formal, a nice pool background that I can use. So just have a few different options there. You don't have to use the standard ones. People always usually appreciate if you've got some virtual backgrounds that it shows that you just like preparing the slides and having a practice run of what you're going to say. Preparation is something that people appreciate as well.